Here are 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana, who conquered the world as children with Motown Records, then watched their empire crumble under the weight of family dysfunction, corporate greed, and one brother's meteoric rise to superstardom. This is the story of how the Jackson 5 fell apart. Back in 1964, when Michael Jackson was just 6 years old, his older brothers Jackie, Tito, and Jermaine formed a group called the Jackson Brothers in their cramped Gary, Indiana home. Their father, Joe Jackson, a former guitarist turned steel mill crane operator, spotted dollar signs in his son's raw talent. By 1965, 9-year-old Michael and 11-year-old Marlon had joined the group, now renamed the Jackson 5. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. In 1969, after signing with Motown Records and being introduced to the public by Diana Ross, the Jackson 5 became the first group in music history to debut with 4 consecutive #1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There. All crafted by Motown's elite songwriting team, The Corporation, including Deke Richards, Freddie Perrin, and Berry Gordy himself, transformed these kids from the industrial Midwest into global superstars practically overnight. By 1975, they had sold over 60 million records worldwide. But behind the glittering facade of America's favorite family group, cracks were already forming that would eventually shatter everything they had built together. The first major fracture was Joe Jackson himself. While the world saw a proud father managing his talented sons, the reality inside the Jackson household was far more twisted. Michael later revealed to Oprah Winfrey the dark truth about their rehearsals. He would be breaking furniture, and it was terrible. Michael recalled about his father's violent outbursts. If you didn't do it the right way, he would tear you up, really get you. Joe would sit in a chair with a belt in his hand, ready to strike any child who missed a step or hit a wrong note. This wasn't just tough love. This was systematic abuse disguised as professional training. Katherine Jackson would plead with her husband to stop, screaming, "Joe, no, you are going to kill them." But Joe believed his harsh methods were necessary. Years later, he defended his approach, telling CNN, "Well, I'm glad I was tough, because look what I came out with. I came out with some kids that everybody loved all over the world." The second fracture was financial exploitation. Despite selling tens of millions of records, the Jackson 5 received only a 2.7% royalty rate from Motown, a fraction of what established artists earned. Even worse, they had zero creative control. Motown's executives decided what songs they sang, how they sang them, and even what instruments they could play. Tito Jackson, an accomplished guitarist, wasn't allowed to play on their recordings because Motown wanted complete artistic control. By 1972, the hits were drying up. The Jackson 5's decline wasn't gradual, it was steep and brutal. Their records started failing on the charts, and a year later, The Corporation, the specialized songwriting team that had crafted their early masterpieces, split up. The magic formula that had made them stars was gone, and Motown seemed uninterested in finding a new one. Joe Jackson had seen enough. In 1975, when their 7-year contract with Motown expired, he made the bold decision to walk away from the label that had made his sons famous. He negotiated a deal with Epic Records that offered a staggering 20% royalty rate, more than 7 times what they were getting at Motown. But this move came with a devastating cost. Motown owned the name the Jackson 5. When the brothers tried to leave, Berry Gordy took them to court, and while the legal battle eventually allowed them to escape, it stripped them of the very name that had become synonymous with their brand. They would have to start over as the Jacksons. Even more devastating was the family split. Jermaine Jackson, who had married Berry Gordy's daughter Hazel Gordy in 1973, faced an impossible choice between loyalty to his brothers or loyalty to his wife and father-in-law. He chose Motown, staying behind as the other 4 brothers moved to Epic Records. The Jackson 5, as the world knew them, was officially dead. But the story doesn't end there. As the Jacksons struggled to rebuild their brand at Epic Records, the youngest brother was quietly planning his escape. Michael Jackson's 1979 solo album, Off the Wall, produced by legendary producer Quincy Jones, was a critical and commercial success. But it was nothing compared to what came next. Thriller, also produced by Quincy Jones and released in 1982, didn't just make Michael a star. It turned him into a cultural phenomenon unlike anything the world had ever seen, cementing his status as the king of pop. The success of Thriller created a new dynamic within the family. Michael was no longer just the little brother with the big voice. He was the biggest star on the planet. When the brothers reunited for the Motown 25 television special in 1983, it was Michael's 2.5-second moonwalk during Billie Jean that made headlines, not the Jackson 5 reunion. 47 million people watched that performance, and they were all talking about Michael. This massive television success convinced the brothers they could capitalize on Michael's fame with a reunion tour. The Victory Tour of 1984 was supposed to be their triumphant return. 6 brothers back together, riding the wave of Michael's unprecedented success. Instead, it became the final nail in the coffin of their brotherhood. From the very beginning, Michael made it clear he didn't want to be there. He refused to rehearse or perform any songs from their new Victory album, staying in separate hotels while his brothers shared rooms, traveling by private jet while they flew commercial. The tour was named after their album, but ironically, none of the songs from Victory were actually performed because Michael wouldn't do them. At $30 a ticket, $85 in today's money, fans were outraged by the steep prices. Michael was so uncomfortable with the commercial nature of the tour that he donated his entire $5 million share to charity, a gesture that strained his relationship with his brothers, who desperately needed the income he was giving away. The tensions reached a breaking point. According to Marlon Jackson, Michael became so exhausted from constantly fighting with his brothers that he had to be placed under medical care. They weren't even speaking to each other before performances. The jealousy was obvious. Fans were clearly there to see the Thriller superstar, not the Jacksons. The end came on December 9, 1984, at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. Without consulting his brothers, without any warning, Michael stepped up to the microphone during their final bow and announced to the stunned audience, "This is our last and final tour." Just like that, it was over. The Victory Tour had been a financial success. 55 concerts, 2.5 million fans, $75 million in gross revenue. But it destroyed what was left of the Jackson family dynamic. Michael's unilateral decision to end the group alienated him from his brothers for most of his remaining life. Marlon Jackson quit the group a month later in January 1985, also pursuing a solo career. By 1989, the remaining 4 brothers had been dropped by Epic Records after their poorly received 2300 Jackson Street album. The Jackson 5, who had once seemed invincible, were finished as a commercial force. The tragedy of the Jackson 5 isn't just that they broke up. It's that they were broken apart by the very forces that made them successful. Joe Jackson's abusive management style created the drive that made them stars, but it also traumatized his children and fractured their family bonds. Motown's exploitation gave them fame, but robbed them of artistic control and fair compensation. And Michael's unprecedented solo success, while validating his immense talent, created jealousies and resentments that made a genuine reunion impossible. Today, with Michael gone since 2009, Joe Jackson dead since 2018, and Tito Jackson passing away just months ago in September 2024, the surviving Jackson brothers continue to perform as the Jacksons. But the magic of those early years, when 5 kids from Gary, Indiana could make the whole world dance, can never be recaptured. The Jackson 5 didn't just fall apart. They were systematically dismantled by abuse, exploitation, legal battles, family betrayals, and the corrupting influence of fame itself. They remain one of the most successful family groups in music history. But their story serves as a cautionary tale about the price of stardom and the fragility of family bonds when money, fame, and power enter the equation.